Right. We are back with the standard, our new podcast, replacing the BGPerform podcast. It's no longer a thing. It doesn't exist. It's figment of your imagination. What did that guy used to say?
Oh, it was totally fiction. So
Fiction.
the dude, what was that?
It was like on Spike TV.
It was like X-Files or something like that.
X-Files. Dude
How
was
much
like,
would it take for you to stay in a graveyard? He's just asking. It doesn't exist. It's fiction. Pure fiction. That's what it
figment
was.
of your imagination. Pure fiction.
Pure
He always
fiction.
looked like Jim Rome. You know who Jim Rome is?
I don't think so.
Jim Rome was just like a sportscaster, like a sports, he had a
Oh,
sports show.
now the name sounds familiar.
He has one of the funniest moments ever in sports history. He's kind of like a little instigator sometimes. Like he wasn't on sport, or he was on Sports Center because he used to have a show called Rome. I think it was just called Rome, or Rome is Burning or something like that. I don't know, some like TV show about sports. And then he shifted on his own. He's kind of like I think his name's Bill Simmons. I don't know if you ever heard of Bill Simmons, but they used to be like Sports Center guys.
Mm-hmm.
But then they kind of just like transitioned on their own.
Yeah.
And when they transitioned, they just became like very outspoken and like vulgar.
Almost like extra versions of themselves.
Yeah. But Jim Rome has a funny clip where he had this quarterback on. I think it was Ryan Leaf, and he kept, or no, it wasn't Ryan Leaf. It was some quarterback, and he kept calling him by the wrong name. And he was
if you call me,
yeah, he's like, if you call me that one more time, I'm gonna like jump over this table. And he goes, okay, and says the name, and the guy just jumps over the table,
like grabs him and like walks him to the ground.
Fucking hilarious. But
I forgot. He was like, "You keep calling me that." He's like, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "Why?" That's not my name.
So funny. So funny.
Yeah, I forgot about
We
that.
are back with another episode of The Standard, episode 2. We're going to be building a little bit on what we talked about last week. And last week we defined what the standard, what that means. What is the standard of coaching? How do we define it? How do we actually like visualize that in our head? And we talked about how that first step is making it a career, right? Or mentally making it a career. Because the more I do this, the more I dive down this rabbit hole of creating standards inside of coaching. I got a comment on one of my posts this past week, and someone asked like, what are your top 5 standards for coaching a client? And I think people are misinterpreting what I'm talking about when I talk about the standard. Like the standard isn't like a 5-step thing, right? It's not something where I have like a Ron Swanson's pyramid of greatness, right? Maybe I should make one. Maybe we should make a standard pyramid of greatness.
Is he gonna start with a buzz cut?
It's
high and tight.
Maybe.
It's the only
Fish
way.
is not food. It's only for play or only for sport. That's one of my favorite ones. But it's ideas, right? It's concepts that hold you accountable as a coach that then carry over into your coaching, right? Obviously, there are things you want to do inside of coaching, and there's standards you want to uphold in the session, and we're going to get to that. But I think what I'm talking about right now and where my mind is with this stuff and where I want this podcast to kind of like initiate from is these big concepts as becoming a coach, because I don't think you can get to certain points if you're not thinking about the things in this way. And thinking of coaching as a career, right, is not really a standard of how you run a session, but it's the first point to get to that point of thinking about how to run a session, right? Because I think once you commit to it as a career, it becomes a lot more serious. And I think that what tends to happen is people use coaching as again, what we talked about, like a stepping stone to a quote unquote real job, or just use it as a supplemental thing, right? And I kind of want to talk about you what?
Like a side hustle.
Yeah, side hustle, yeah. And I want to talk about today why this tends to hurt people, right? But I just think if we attack this from the lens of not worrying about the session right now when you're listening to this, but worrying about like coaches who want to make this a career, people who are really fully committed and wake up and be like, hey, I want to be the best coach that I can possibly be, then these episodes are for you, right? So today we're going to talk about a 9-to-5 coach and how not to become one, right? I've talked about this a little bit over the last couple of weeks. I've made a couple posts about it. Me and Jerry have been talking about kind of this idea or this concept over the last couple of weeks. And I just think it's so important. And when I first heard this concept, I wanted to start with a little bit of a story. I may have mentioned this on the podcast last time, but there was a person I used to train, and they were a professional fighter. And the first time I kind of heard the concept of like 9 to 5 fighter was because of this person. And they reached out to me for help. They were telling me that they just weren't feeling good with the last person they were working with. They weren't feeling structured, aligned, whatever. And I kind of talked to someone that was in their camp with them, and it wasn't like a coach or anything, but it was someone who had like worked with them in the past. And they were like, they're the biggest flaw of this individual was they're a 9 to 5 fighter. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what is it? You know? And they were just like, they show up during the times they have to, but like outside of that, they're not dedicated, right? Like, it's just something they do, right? And they're not truly there. It's something that works for them, works for their schedule, and they just kind of do it at the bare minimum, and they use it to just kind of do whatever in life, right? And I heard that and I was like, damn, I've actually never thought about that, because, you know, when you think about the 9 to 5 lifestyle, it's that exactly. It's like, okay, I'm going to show up at 9, I'm done at 5. I don't take my work home with me. I don't worry about it. I do what I need to do when I'm there. It's that sort of thing. That's not always a bad thing, right? That I'm not saying it's a negative. But in the sense of coaching, in the sense of like how this individual was with fighting, it shows. Like it literally shows, right? Like they lost. I don't think they won a single fight in the UFC. I only worked with them for 2 fights, and then they kind of transitioned, and it was one of those things where I was like, you know, just very tough to take responsibility in some of those settings, right? So I think what I want to talk about today is that idea of a 9 to 5 coach, and how not to become one, right? Because like I said, I think in coaching there's so many 9 to 5 coaches, right? There's so many people who are like, hey, I'm going to coach when I can. I'm going to coach during the hour this time, and then once I leave, I'm done with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with defining it, because Jerry and I kind of came up with a definition, and the definition we came up with was someone who only practices coaching during coaching hours or does the bare minimum. Do you want to add anything to that, or
No. I think building.
break that down a little bit more?
Yeah. I mean, so obviously, if you think like if you're a coach listening to this, when you get home, if you completely shut off and stop thinking about everything, and you don't think about work until you get back to work, or you don't do any planning or anything that leads into a good next day at work, that kind of falls into that idea of being 9 to 5. So like Brandon and I, when we're done with work, we're not really ever done with work. It's always in the background. It's always going in some degree, whether it's programming or something like that. And we'll dive into all that stuff a little bit more. But I think,
Well, I think, not to cut you off, I just want to, because it's in my head.
Yeah.
I think the difference is I don't consider the session work. And I don't mean that like obviously it's work, but like when I get to the session, it's just executing. Like there is nothing else that I worry about except executing on the session at hand, right? Where I think a lot of other people look at that as the work, whereas like I look at that as stuff. Like that's the end
That's
point.
like the outcome.
Yeah. And I think
that's
one
the
of the
easiest
things,
part.
and that's what I'm trying to get at is like it's easy to coach when, you know, if that's in that session most of the time, right? What's not easy is doing all the other stuff that prepares you for that hour again, right? And I think that's where people lack, and they lack in that idea of like they think of the session as this is where I'm getting all the work done, right? And I look at the other 23 hours that go into the day as where the work is getting done, and that 1 hour is where I just execute. That's it. But go ahead, sorry.
No, that's honestly perfectly said, because I was going to say that as we're in the off work hours, if we call work, just for the sake of what I'm saying, work would be you at the physical location doing the thing. Off work hours is basically your overtime in that sense. So when we're not in session, there's always something happening, whether it's reflection or programming or just trying to make sure that the next time you go to execute, it's happening a little bit easier and a little smoother. But I'm excited to dive into all these pieces, because you'll see that each individual one can stand out, but they truly do form like an idea of a solid coach who's always bettering themselves, and it shows because they're bettering their clients too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what we're going to kind of dive into is how to avoid that, right? How to avoid becoming a 9 to 5 coach. And some of the pieces we have we're going to talk into are like what the steps you can take to avoid them, talking about values as a coach, talking about committing outside of the session, right? And we're going to dive into all those things. So let's start here. We defined it, right? We defined what a 9 to 5 coach is. But let's start with
Really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got to cut you off. Do you have AC running or something?
I do. Is it loud?
It is. I didn't want to cut you off before,
I'll
but then
turn
I
it off.
remembered I like ignored it for a little bit and I heard it, but
We turned it off. It's okay.
all right, that sounds a little bit
I
better.
just might start dripping sweat, but that's all right.
That's just the hard work showing. This is the behind the scenes that we're talking about.
Just drenched
not
from a
just being
podcast.
not just speaking about it. We're being about it. You know, walk the
Literally.
walk.
I was when I went to Virginia this past weekend for the 4th of July. By the way, happy birthday, America, greatest country on earth. And we went to Virginia and we were outside. And I always told Danielle, I'm like, I don't do well in heat. Like I just don't. It doesn't feel good. I just sweat a lot. And I was kind of thinking this past weekend, I don't think I've been in like a super hot, like super hot climate where she's seen me. And I got there, I put on sunscreen, which I already hate sunscreen, but I put on sunscreen. I'm sitting outside. I just don't like it. So we go into the water, having a great time. Probably about 2 hours in, I start to feel like that. I'm outside in the heat. Like I'm just exhausted. Right.
Yeah.
And I just started like sitting in the chair. I'm just like falling asleep, just dripping sweat, right? And she just looks over. She literally looks over at me. She's like, "You're sweating," and I was like, "Yeah, like I don't feel good."
Hot out here.
So then, fast forward, we stay another like half hour, or I think we were there like 4 hours total. We go to leave, and I had to carry a couple chairs and like a bag, and they're just like, they're hot, they're sweating. And I was just literally like dripping, like sweat pouring down my face, dripping off my nose, dripping out. She's like, "Oh my God." She was like, "I didn't realize it was this bad." I'm like, "I told you."
I tried to warn you.
I don't do well in heat. And so when it gets hot, I am a polar bear.
When you're around Brandon in the heat, it almost feels like you're in a movie like Get Out. Like it's like a social horror movie in the sense, and I'm the same way, where if someone goes to talk to you, the only thing we can say is like, "Man, it's hot out here, huh?" And then like they hear it so many times, they're like, am I being brainwashed? What is going on?" It's hot out here, huh?
It's so bad. But
open mouth, just mouth breathing.
Like a dog. Just panting. But anyway,
let's dive into it.
Let's start. We got, what steps can you take to avoid them? Right. And we kind of wrote down a few steps that we think are very helpful. And I think this is a better place to start, to kind of like break down the steps first, then we'll dive into each one. Research and development as a coach, AKA projects, right? If you're working on projects outside of the session, this is a great way to continue to prepare and grow as a coach, right? I work on the podcast with Jerry. Jerry works on this with me. I also work on the Coach Connect. I also work on some stuff for YouTube. And I work on some other little things here and there for like long-term, right? Content, educational stuff, that sort of stuff, right? But those projects keep me focused when I'm not in the session, but they also keep me focused in the session as to like, what can I pull out of this session, right? What stories can I find? What questions are coming up? What cues am I struggling with, or is the person struggling with? And when you have projects outside of it, right? When you have things that are, again, not pulling your attention away, but making you think a little bit deeper about that, the session becomes a lot more exciting, because it's not just like, okay, I'm training someone, right? It's like, okay, there's pieces that I can get better at here. And if I can't get better at them, or I feel I'm good, or there's problems, I can then share that in my other project, or I can work on that in the other project, right? So again, it's, to me, not becoming a 9 to 5 coach, or how not to become one, is about developing like an ecosystem around coaching that is ever, I guess, evolve or ever turning, right? So it's like, when I'm not coaching, I'm reflecting. When I'm not reflecting, I'm producing. When I'm not producing, I'm coaching. And it's like this same thing that just kind of like builds on itself. And when you find a nice ecosystem that leads you down that direction, it kind of, the work gets done by itself, right? Because you don't have to worry about when you're going to study. You don't have to worry about all these things. You just kind of do, right?
Mhm.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. When it comes to research and development too, it kind of plays into where you want to be in the industry. So obviously, you're not going to be researching things you don't care about. You're going to be diving into the things that are interesting for you, or to you rather. So as you're doing your research and development, when you're trying to become a better coach, you almost have to dial in on a niche. If you don't have one, find one. So find what you're passionate about in the industry, because ideally those are the clients that you're going to want to have. You want to get the clients that are they have goals that are close to, if not exactly, what you love to do in coaching. And I think projects built around that as well will also help you build your name in the industry. So with projects that are built around your niche, you can, one, with your research and having these projects, you can learn much more about it, deep dive into it, get all the little nuanced things that seem to be fed to people as misinformation, especially on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, in this foundation, you're becoming smarter, and you have evidence-based practice that you're using. So your clients can become better, and it'll show, like, you become better as a coach, and it'll show because your clients are also becoming better in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge piece of it because, again, when you create the ecosystem, right? Like I talked about, I have the Coach Connect, which then kind of coincides with all the content I put out, which then coincides with my online work and the podcast, right? So it's like everything kind of creates this ecosystem of having to work on being a coach in some capacity, right? My content makes me kind of reflect on the things that are going throughout my day and how I want to speak on them. My Coach Connect is where I kind of create curriculum and I create conversations with coaches about things that I think are important, right? Then the podcast is a place where I can talk with Jerry and be a little bit more long form and just like open about ideas and concepts. And then I take all of that into my coaching, right? And I think what one of the things you said is like when you're in a session, and if you're only thinking about the session when you're in the session, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're making it a lot harder. You're also doing a client a disservice, right? Because we want to prepare for those things. We want to be ready for what's to come. And I think if you're not preparing, if you're not researching the session, like the type of session you're running, seeing like the order, organization, all of that stuff, and making sure it's refined, efficient, like that's what we need to be doing as a coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like segues into the next one, which is reflecting on sessions. And this is something I've been trying to be better about because a lot of the times in the past, you kind of get caught up as a coach, right? And I think you prepare and then you just kind of like run through the session sometimes. And especially when you get easier clients, when you get people who, you know, if you're, and again, if you're doing your job as a coach, sometimes coaching can get a little boring, right? Because you end up teaching someone a lot of stuff, but they still enjoy training with you and they still enjoy your expertise, but there's not as much to correct. You're kind of just turned into a rep counter on certain things. And it's really important to still stay focused and try to find new ways to be better as a coach, right? Whether it be communication, whether it be questions, whether it be, again, finding more things to correct. And that doesn't mean just like making stuff up just to correct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But just being a little bit more focused on the goal of, hey, I need to, or I want to correct X, Y, and Z. Now, how do I do that? What are some ways I can look into that? Taking that outside of the session, because I just think there's so much work that can actually be done in the session, and we're ever evolving in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have multiple clients, which most of us should, there's going to be different people, different types of
Yeah.
people, different needs of those people. So just waiting until you get to the session usually doesn't bode well for anything in regards to, you know, making progress in as a coach or as a client.
Yeah. And one of the bigger parts of reflecting is so you can become better. Just like research and development, this is essentially the same thing, but in a more practical sense. So looking back and like, let's say Brandon and I just had a session and I trained him and I say, like, was this the best it could have been for Brandon? Did he get what he needed out of it? Could I have improved anywhere in this session? And you have to be honest with yourself, because sometimes it's nice to be like, nah, man, it was the best session in the world.
Yeah.
But if you say like, well, you know, this could have gone a little smoother. I think when we were doing these movements, I should have corrected that form, and it wasn't like information overload for him. So like you almost have to critique your coaching in the session as well. But then asking yourself too, like, is this truly helping my client? Excuse me. Is this truly helping my client build toward their goals? Because I think it becomes really easy, especially when you don't do research and development and plan out your sessions. It's really easy if you're just a coach going in and be like, we're going to do these things today. It's easy to say, like, well, we got what we needed out of the exercises, but did you choose the right exercises? Did you do everything properly? A lot goes into it. So looking back and being honest with yourself, like, did my client respond well to this physically, emotionally? Are they seeing and feeling the progress? That's huge. Because if
Mhm.
they're not, you need to kind of have that conversation with them, like, all right, what are we feeling? And it becomes more than just reflecting on the session at that point.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
I think that's like such a crucial point because I don't think I don't think we're ever gonna not have stuff to fix inside of a session, right? And I think one of the things you brought up inside of that is when you do have stuff, like there's so much that I've done even recently in sessions where I'm like, I wish I didn't say it that way. I didn't like the way that sounded. I didn't like the reaction I got. It's
Yeah.
obviously didn't communicate well, right? And it's not like a negative, like totally ruined anything, but it's like, when you explain something and the client doesn't get it, right? Then it's like, okay, well, what did I say wrong? Right? Like what
Mm-hmm.
can I communicate better? Sometimes it's not always you, sometimes it is the client, but for the most part, like there's a responsibility you have to take as, okay, I could have explained that better, right? And especially in the online setting. The online setting is, again, like you have to explain better because you're not
Yeah.
there to show it. You're not there to visually, tactile, like any of that stuff to actually like show the client what you need to do. So you need to be really good at explaining yourself and what you need inside of or out of the session and the exercise in that moment, right? But I think when you're reflecting on those sessions, it's it's kinda at like those types of things right there, like, how could I have communicated better? Did that feel great? When you leave a session, if you're not feeling like, "Wow, that went fucking awesome," right? That was, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
the best. And we have those sessions, and if you're doing enough of them, you're gonna reach that point where you're like, "Wow, that was a really good session." And even in those sessions, there's probably stuff that you can fix, right? But on those
Mm-hmm.
sessions where you leave and you're like, I didn't really like how that went. I didn't like that conversation. I didn't like the way that exercise felt or looked. I didn't like the super like whatever it is. Like try to mark them down in some way. Try to write them down. Try to memorize them, whatever it might be, because those are pieces you can go back and look on, right? And when you have to build this stuff out, so it finds its way into program design, right? And that's where I think helps me the most is because a lot of the stuff that I see now is either obviously like communication based or it's just program design for the individual, right? So it's either I'm not explaining clearly what I want or the design of the program doesn't match either the environment or the goal of the individual and I need to like fix that. So it's very clear to me the things I need to fix. But for some people, it might be simply like again the delivery of the program, right? I talked about this week where it's like the way you deliver the program matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not looking at that, if you're doing Google Sheets and it's a little bit difficult to kind of download and track and all that stuff, like find the next thing that's better, right? But you're not going to know that unless you go out and you give something a try and you feel the difference, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel the difference of Coach RX inside of my program design and my program delivery, and that helps me, right? Coach RX makes not being a 9 to 5 coach easier because it
Yeah.
gives me opportunities to program, create like the video log. It helps me like figure out ways to continue to improve that. And that's like another part of the ecosystem that allows me to work on my coaching when I'm not actually coaching, if that makes sense.
Especially with online.
Yeah.
Gee, I can't clear my throat for shit today.
It's okay.
But especially online because they have the notes section where like if you go through and you're reviewing, you're like, all right, I could see everything is green. This one's red. Oh, I saw you missed your thing this Wednesday, your workout. What happened? Or if everything's green and you see like the weights are going up and everything, be like, hey, great job. I noticed you had a question on this. Here you go. So it makes it really easy for the online stuff because there's no missed communication. It's all in one location, which is
Yeah.
so easy.
And one of the things I started doing, and this was me reflecting, right? And this was me really deeply reflecting the last couple months, was like, how can I help the individual online understand more about what to expect throughout the week, right? And I was writing and it just didn't feel like I was explaining myself well, or whatever. So I just use another software I have called Loom. And on Sunday night, I hop on each person's program. I video record myself with the screen share, just explaining everything. Like, hey, here's what Monday's going to
Nice.
look like. Here's the theme of the week. This is what Monday, Wednesday, Friday is going to look like, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday is going to look like, or whatever the days you train. Here's what I'm expecting from this session. Here's why this rep scheme is like this. This is what we're building on from the week before. I've had great feedback, and people have been like, oh, that's awesome. That feels nice. Like I can explain and go back, watch it easy. So it's like those types of things where in the past I would have not, or I didn't reflect, or if I did reflect, I obviously was missing some of these points, but it takes time to kind of go through and think about these processes and, figure out the best way forward. Right. But again, that's how you avoid becoming a 9 to 5 coach. It's not just, okay, I did my session, I wrote the program, that's it, I'm done. Right. I cancel it. I don't want you guys to get hooked on like the 9 to 5 thing, right? Because like you work when you work. That's not the big deal. Like the thought of like I only work and that's it. Like that's what I want you to kind of like take away from this. That's not like if you work 5 hours, that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So that's what I want you to understand. That's what I want you to break down, and that's what I want you to take away from this overall, right?
Yeah, the time that you're working has the intent to just be the best coach you could be.
Exactly. And that's really what this boils down to, is like intent on becoming the best version of yourself. So segueing into the next thing, which we kind of talked about, getting feedback on sessions, but let's dive into the next one, which is dedicated time to study, right? So like how often are you as a coach going through and studying the things that need to be studied, right? Or refining those skills, looking at certain program design, looking at how other people do it, working with a coach, trying to find that next step, right? Because I've found that in the times, and I had a while where when I was traveling a lot, where it was really hard for me to get into a schedule of study, and it hindered me a bit, right? Because I had a transition where I was coaching like 10 sessions a day. You're talking about like 20 to 30 athletes in a day that I was seeing, right? And then I went from coaching to one person for maybe an hour a day. So I was missing so much in-person time where I was studying essentially. Like that time was being taken up by actual work in the session. And then I was studying on top of that, where I went to one session and was just missing out on that because of the travel or the other things that were going on. And I really had to force myself to sit down and be like, hey, like you can't miss on these things. You can't miss these tasks. You can't stop. So I did a course. I did a couple courses. Actually, while I was doing that, I found ways to make studying have to be a part of my life. I started working with a coach for a little bit more like programming theory, but I started sitting down with a coach. I think it was like once a week, and we dove into program design and we dove into some questions and things like that I had and how to improve it. So like these are all things that I have to fit in. And now what I do is I make time during the week to, maybe it's not fitness stuff. Maybe it's not like I'm sitting down studying reps and sets, but I'm sitting down and studying business tactics. I'm sitting down and studying like structure, right? Like I made this whole thing recently about like the BGPerform business, where I want to clean up my offers. I want to get an understanding of where I'm at with revenue. I want to get an understanding of what my mission is, and I needed to refine all that stuff. And it took me a really long time to sit down and be like, okay, here's what I was doing before. And it's like you almost avoid it when you know you have to work on it, right? Like you're like, ugh, this is going to be a pain. I'm going to suck at this. It's going to be frustrating. But you have to, and you have to take that time. You have to sit down. You have to work. And there's so many tools out there today as well, right? Like I use Claude, and Claude is really helpful on a lot of these things where you can kind of create channels or threads or whatever it is, and it's very good memory. It's very good at pulling back and keeping me in check. And I just did another refining of what I do this past week, and like I need to be held more accountable on this. I need you to help me, right? And it helps me build, it helps me go through that thing, but it also helps me kind of create study sessions, ways to kind of implement this stuff. And it's been really, super helpful on keeping me. And I feel like I'm getting back into like that groove of coaching where it's more of a flow state than it is having to like pull myself into it, right? If that makes sense. Like I'm always ready to coach, but I'm feeling like very smooth in the sessions. I'm feeling very confident in the sessions. I'm feeling very structured in the sessions. And that's been really nice.
Yeah, I think I have one example for why it's important too, because setting aside time for studying, obviously, like you want to better yourself, you want to become smarter, you want to be the best version of yourself as a coach, but also you want to stand out amongst the other coaches. If you're taking time to set aside to make sure you can study, do research, and it's especially with program design, having specific time and hours for that during the week is going to breed better results. So I just wrote the difference between programming because you need to and programming because you have set times throughout the week produces
Makes sense.
produces completely different program design results, and it just dedicated time to design sparks innovation and again better programming. So when you actually have time to sit down, you can reflect on the programming and look back a little bit more, which we're going to dive into, but also you can see if you've had any like faults in your past when you weren't setting time aside. You could feel the difference. Your clients will feel the difference and they'll say it. They'll tell you, "Hey man, I've been like really progressing." Great. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So I think having set times is arguably one of the easiest ways, or one of the best ways to make your life easier as a coach, but also one of the best ways to get great results for your clients so they keep working hard and they trust the process more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I was just going to add into that is with program design, like when you have structured days, like it feels so much better. I used to be really bad about this when I first started online coaching. This was like years ago, where obviously there's no structure, you're not seeing the person. And sometimes I just wouldn't have the structure set in place and I would forget, or I just wouldn't do it and I wouldn't have it and I'd have to rush, or I'd have to rush write a program, or I'd have to, I didn't feel confident in what I was delivering, right? But then as of the last few years, I've really found time, and especially the last 2 years, I've really found specific time during the week where I always start on Monday, right? I start on Monday. I do what comes easiest to me. If there's people that I'm like, hey, okay, I got a good idea here, I just run with those. And then I kind of like, I don't put them off, but I run the ones that I just don't feel as like spur of the moment, like light bulb, I leave those, but I have specific days or times, right? Now I usually do specific days. I usually start on Monday now with programming, and I do, a good portion of the programming on Monday. And then I usually do them today, like on Thursday, and then I
Mhm.
clean them up on Friday, right? I try to do a little bit in the beginning of the week and then towards the end of the week, because as people finish workouts, I'll fill in the little details. I'll fill in the weights that I want them to use. I'll fill in or change some of the details depending on that. So I try to have something early in the week that kind of gets a lot of the basic stuff out of the way. And then I
Mhm.
have something at the end that helps me refine and go through and add the little details as the week finishes. But that just helps me a ton because it doesn't give me pressure of like, oh my God, it's Sunday night and I need to finish ten program designs for Monday.
Mhm.
And that doesn't help anybody, right? And I think as a coach, you have to really see that and see what the time is that you're putting into program design. Is it dedicated time that's like, a solid couple hours each day that helps you figure out like, okay, step one is X, right? I want to do these people, right? And this might help too, where when you have dedicated program design time, it's like, all right, I'm going to do these set of people every Monday, right? I'm going to do these set of people every Thursday. I'm going to do these set of people every Friday, whatever the days might be. And it's really important. And I think that's what's helped me the most also in, because when you write design, you almost want to keep going through these processes, right? Like you want to reflect on the session you wrote the week before. You want to reflect on the session that's going to come up that week. You want to go back to the other weeks prior to that and see like, is someone making progress? Do I need to change anything? Is there something I could communicate better? Are there any questions? Are there any missed exercises? Are there any missed work? Like what's going on here, right? And if you're rushing, you're not going to go back and look. You're not going to see those details and you're going to miss out. And then the client's going to miss out because of that. Right.
Mhm.
So I think that's why dedicated program time is really important. And that's why we as coaches, like we need to find that time in our schedule.
Yeah, I
And I
agree.
think being a 9 to 5 coach, like is essentially that, like, that's part of it where it's like, okay, cool. I write the workout for the session or I don't write the workout for the session. I just kind of do it when I get there, which was my worst nightmare in Florida. I know I've said this 100 times, but like when I worked at the gym in Florida, it was just like, I was just amazed at how these people would show up 10 minutes late, 5 minutes before a session, all rushed, wouldn't even have a workout written before they'd walk into a session. And then they're sitting there kind of looking at the gym, writing a workout for the day. I'm like, dude, like, what are you doing? And eventually I had to sit down and like, I had to sit down with these guys and be like, what are we? And like, none of them took responsibility was the
Mm-hmm.
problem, right? None of them had an app like I have or a structure to program and deliver the program. None of them had this idea of like, I'm going to sit down and actually design a program beforehand. And the ones who did who did take that time were late, and they
Yeah.
would just not show up, like actually show up to the session. So they're like, yeah, I'm writing the program design and they're doing a pretty good job at it, but then they're not showing up to the session. They're late. They're forgetting things. It's just like, so you have to have both of those pieces to it. But like when I was in Florida, and I'm not going to name names, but like there was just multiple people. I was just like, how are you doing this? How are you getting away with this? And obviously like I can only worry about myself so much, and I can worry about what I'm there to do. But it's like when you're working around that environment, it's very frustrating, right? And
Yeah.
that's the type of coach that becomes a 9 to 5 coach who is like, all right, well, I plan the session, so I'll just show up in 10 minutes and I'll do what I got to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just, you don't want to be that type of coach, right? You don't want to be someone who only worries about training in training, right? Um, and I think that is, again, because like we just talked about the program design, but like the program reflection also dives into that as well, which we kind of mentioned. When you're dedicating time to program design, you're automatically going to be creating time to reflect, like I
Mm-hmm.
talked about, on the program. And that's exactly what you need as a coach, right? Because then really from there, this all boils down to the last piece of the puzzle, which is like our values as a coach, right? And this is like such an important piece for me because values are what drive us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of coaches in general, a lot of people in general, have never actually sat down and been like, all right, well, what are my values as a coach? Like, what do I actually, well, let me rephrase, what are my values in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that get me to be a coach. And I wrote down mine, and I've talked about this a lot, but I want to just briefly touch on these again. We have autonomy, family, health, purpose, and mastery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with those values, those are things that like are supposed to mean something to me, and they do, right? So when I look at autonomy, I want to be able to make my own decisions, and I want to be able to coach in the capacity that I want to be able to coach, right? But to do that, I got to have things in order, right? I got to have my sessions ready. I got to study. I got to have these things in order, right? That is what autonomy is. Autonomy is the ability to kind of like do what you want when you want, right? Family is really important to me. It's a big piece of who I am, and it's like that needs to be found. That needs to have time in there as well. And for me, if I'm not organizing that stuff, then that's going to bleed into that time that I spend with my family, right? Health is obviously number one, right? Or not, maybe not number one, but like health is a big, it's because these aren't really in order, but like health is one of the biggest pieces for me. It's like staying healthy, being able to do my job, taking care of myself, eating well, sleeping, trying to live as stress free as possible. Like all of those things are beneficial, but like health is what makes the rest of this tick. Purpose is obviously like my purpose is here, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
educating, it's coaching, it's showing up for individuals, it's leading people, it's influencing the highest standard of coaching. Like that is my purpose in life, and that's what like I feel like I was put here to do, right? And then mastery is just I want to be the best possible coach I can be at the end of the day. Like when I'm done, my tombstone goes up, whatever it is, I hope I get buried. I want a Viking funeral. I want to get burned on
If
a
you,
boat, sent
I was
down
to
the
say you
river.
won't be buried if you have a Viking funeral, but
But well, I started watching the show 1883, and then now I'm on 1923.
I feel like I've heard of it, but I don't know
The
what it
I
is.
guess it's a precursor to Yellowstone,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they used to live. Obviously, they lived in Montana. That was like where they ended up. Like maybe, well, I guess if you watched it, you know. But um, and they were talking a little bit about like the whole burial process, and I was just like, I want a Viking funeral. I want to be put in a boat, lit on fire, sent down the river, and that's it.
It's exactly what Nick Offerman said. He was like, "I want a Viking funeral, and I want Chris Pratt to shoot the arrow."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think like those are all pieces and those are all values of mine, right? So like when I go back and talk about everything that we just talked about in that 9 to 5 setting, I think that's a big piece of why people become 9 to 5 coaches right? Is because they don't have those values set. And because they don't have those values set, they're not researching, they're not developing themselves as coaches, they're not reflecting on sessions, they're not getting feedback on sessions, they're not dedicating time to studying or dedicating time to program design. They're just showing up, right? And a lot of these places too, a lot of these coaching places set you up to be that way because they either kind of structure or like in your setting, right? When you worked at Vasa, like
Mm-hmm.
it's very like, I remember you were telling me like the program design had to be a certain way, right?
Yeah, it had to be on these like really terrible pieces of paper that we had to write it all down. It was a mess.
Yeah. So it's
It,
like,
it made it really hard to progress too because there was only room for like so much. And like you can't actually like space it out at all.
yeah.
So
But it's like those types of pieces being set up in that way in coaching doesn't help anything because it doesn't put you in a position where you can be creative, where you can trust yourself. It's like you got to fit yourself in this gap or in this hole that gets fit into another structure that then builds this big facility. It's like that's not coaching, right? That's cheerleading
yeah.
essentially. Right? And to be a great coach, you have to trust yourself. You have to go out on a limb. And like I said, to start to kind of like tie this all up, you have to first commit to this being a career and tell yourself like, hey, I want this to be a career. And then when you make that commitment, you can't fall into this 9 to 5 coach nonsense, right? You can't just
Yeah.
show up and coach and that's it, right? Because that's not committing to a career. And this is like one of the very first steps. And that's why I wanted to talk about this one after that first conversation, is because these things are so important that this is what builds a coaching career, right? When you make that first step of, hey, I want to become a coach, then this is the next battle, is like, don't become a 9 to 5 coach. Don't be someone who just shows up and coaches when it's time and then kind of like fucks off until it's time to coach again, right?
Yeah.
So anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, I was gonna say like when you think about your values, just like truly think, what do you actually care about?
Mm-hmm.
What are the most important things to you? Are you aiming to be about it or just look the part? And I think you have to ask yourself, be honest with yourself. Like if you're in it just for the money, like one, you might not be in the best industry if you're starting off and that's what you care about, because you're not going to really grow if all you care about is like the clout or money that comes with coaching. You're going to grow with all the behind the scenes stuff. And I've talked about this before, but I know coaches who only want to train the gifted. They don't care about people who are struggling. I've done tons of consultations for multiple different gyms. I'm not going to say which one this was, because one of the coaches I gave a client to, and the first thing they said was, "How come you didn't tell me they're so bad at moving?" And it's like, what? Like when he said that, I was
Good
like,
job.
yeah, I was like, what? He goes, can't even do heel to toe walks, which for a child is pretty tough, but
Heel and toe walks, people struggle with those a lot.
yeah, he's a 10-year-old
100%.
kid. He's awkward mover. He's still developing. He's taller for his age, so it's like, okay, he grew really quickly. Now he's a baby giraffe. We talked about that, but like he was like, yeah, man, he's terrible at moving. You should have told me. And it's like, I don't have to tell you fucking shit. I tell you what their goal is and you do it. It's your job. Like do your job. And I said that. I was like, bro, it's your job to make him better at that. I remember telling my boss at the time, I was like, bro, I'm not giving him a single fucking client after this. I was like, he could do it on his own, and he might, but like, he only wants to train people who are gifted. Like, that's it. So, like, ask yourself what your values are, why you're actually in the industry. If you're in here for the right reasons, awesome. If you're in here for the money, whatever, you do you. But also ask yourself, how do you want to build your name? Because your name in the industry your values will be reflected in that. And eventually, even if you become a great coach, people are going to see like, man, all this dude cares about is clout. And it's really easy to see, especially from a coach's standpoint. So finding what you care about and making sure that you dial in on that and having it you pull all your values into your work, and it's going to create a better product, better results, a better coach as yourself. And your name is literally built off of your values.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to add is I want people, because I know I mentioned this earlier, but like becoming a coach as a career doesn't always just smoothly work in the beginning. So like if you need to do other work, that's totally fine. I had to do other work. I'm sure Jerry's had to do other work to supplement still becoming a coach. The goal is to supplement, right? And I think people use coaching the other way around. They use coaching as a supplement to another career. But I think as a coach, if you want this to be your full thing, it's very hard in the beginning, right? And you're gonna have to work hard. You're gonna have to sell yourself. You're gonna have to get in front of people. You're gonna have to have those conversations. But I think those conversations, right, don't have to stop you from still having a life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can still, like, as you're finding other work that supplements you as coach, like, you can still build a really strong coaching career and keep those values in order to become a great coach, right? You can still have another job that supports you and still find the time to do all these things, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
where it's like in the past where, I've used it where maybe I wasn't coaching as many people, right? I didn't have as many sessions, I didn't have as many classes that I was doing. So it was like in that time I was doing as much as I could outside of that while also working to help me supplement that.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you guys to also understand, like, again, do what you need to do to become a coach, right? At the end of the day, it's the mental change or decision that you want coaching to be a career, and knowing you're going to come back to it as you build, right? That means if you're a waiter or a waitress, or you work at a convenience store or whatever it is, like, that's there to supplement you, but it doesn't take away from the fact that, like, when you have the extra time, it's put towards coaching, right? Like, being 9 to 5 in those settings is fine, right? But, like, if you want a career in this, you cannot be 9 to 5, right? You cannot make or you have to make that commitment. You can't just kind of like one foot in, one foot out, because you'll get eaten alive in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
It'll beat you down until it'll waterboard you until you can't breathe. And it'll take the cloth off, and you'll get a client, and you'll be like, all right, I did it. And then it's going to go right back.
Psych.
Literally. So
Now it's a pillow. Just
yeah. So you have to be ready for it. You have to have both feet in, and know that, like, work can be supplemental, right? And you need it that from time to time, because it's very difficult. But I think that's it for me. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add in.
Yeah, I think if you don't have values written down or you don't have a structure, I think you obviously, like, we just gave you a template to start off to make sure you're not a 9 to 5 coach. So going through and making sure you have time for research and development, making sure you have time for reflecting your sessions, asking your clients, hey, how can I be better for you? And take that feedback, even if it's negative and they're just like, man, you've kind of been like slacking a little bit.
Mhm.
Take that, be like, all right, own it. And then go from there. Make sure you have time to study. Make sure you have all of these pieces organized. And then for that, honestly, it's going to be super easy from there. You just build upon it. Finding all these things, like Brandon and I have done it over the past couple of years, but like if you have all of this written down and we're telling you, like, yeah, this is a really good template, use it, you're going to do really well.
Yeah, exactly. Shave your head, grow a beard.
I didn't do either of those.
You
I can't-
failed.
to be fair, I grew a beard. Looked
Yeah.
very Amish.
Very.
It was very here, not here. Grew a hell of a mustache though.
Oh yeah. Remember that one
Yeah.
mustache you had where you twirled the ends?
Yeah, bro, that was elite.
Yeah.
I even had the 1920s like undercut, so it was short on the sides, like back on. I just go like this to people, and they're like, "Oh fuck."
They're like, oh god, this guy can fight.
Oh, his fists are facing up. Shit. Yeah, do all those things. Make sure you got some good facial hair or a bald, smooth head, beautiful up top. You're good.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that's it for this week. Diving into 9 to 5 coach and how not to be one. Maybe you should come up with a better title. I don't know. How
I'll think of
not to be a
something.
9 to 5 coach. I don't know. But
9
anyway,
to 5, more like get alive.
dang. We'll end it on that.
Shit.
But thank you for tuning in. As always, if you guys want to work with myself or Jerry, you can reach out at www.bgperform.com/training. If you want to reach out to Jerry specifically, it's at Coach Jerry Hayes, and my Instagram is at bgperform_. We have a lot of options. We got in-person coaching, online coaching. We got the Coach Connect. A lot of stuff right now. So if you're a coach interested in training or influencing the highest standards in your own training, so it carries over into your business and your coaching, then we are the people for you. If you have any questions, leave it to us. We'll answer them as we move forward. And I think that's it. And we will be back soon with another episode. I appreciate you guys, as always. Peace.